You've probably heard the advice, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. I think that's pretty good for interviews, and we're doing college applications and college interviews these days around our house. So you got to, step into that. New people, new kids with new jobs, giving them, hey, dress up, show up for that job, dress for the job you want. Here's me. Sleep all day. That'd be lovely. Or how about this one? Here's a window washer dressed up for the job that he really ultimately wants, right? I love it. When I was coming up in my jobs, from lawn mowing to bucking bales of hay, dress for the job you want meant wear jeans and boots. When I was feeding calves, hand bottle feeding calves, man, that was quite a job. When I was up in the rafters of a barn sucking down hay dust, those are quite the jobs. I remember there's some jobs where it was kind of like, can you fog a mirror? Are you alive? Some jobs where can you hold this steady? Can you just hold this steady? One time I had to wear an orange jumpsuit for a safety watch job at an Arco refinery, right? I had all these little jobs that didn't quite rise to the level of the job that I would want. But today in our passage in Esther chapter 5, Esther puts on the royal robes because she has got business to do. She dresses up in her finest, and it's really an amazing story. She's been struggling to figure out what her role is in the whole problem that's going on. There's chaos in the city. Her cousin Mordecai comes and says, you got to do something about this. Who knows? Maybe this is the reason for such a time as this. You've been placed in the palace. And she's like, I haven't even seen the king for 30 days. He's cooled off on his passion for me. I don't know how to get his attention and not die. But she decides, and we see that in Esther chapter 4, if I perish, I perish. And so she just decides to step in. Now this is a young woman. This is probably 5 years into her marriage to Xerxes. And she was probably taken as a 12, 13-year-old, somewhere around there, into the harem. And so she's 17, 18 years old, most likely. This is a young woman who has gathered up herself in everything that she has. And she says, I'm going to go do this. After she asks everybody to fast for her, after she prepares her heart and says, okay, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to go appeal to the king for the life of my people, because who knows, God may have put me in this time for this place. And so she dresses for the job. Check this out. She says, it says, on the third day after this fasting, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. Right? King, royal. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight. And he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Right, so we know this from uncovering, well, I haven't done much archaeology, but uncovering different Persian capitals. We see here one of the kings of Persia with a scepter, holding it out. And then people behind him with axes, because we're gonna protect this king. But here it goes. He extends the royal scepter, and Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even up to half of my kingdom." And Esther said, well, if it please the king, let the king and Haman, who we've found is the bad guy who's trying to kill all of the Jews. Ask Haman to come to a banquet, a feast that I prepared for the king. And they're like, drinking parties? Yes, I love that sort of thing. And then the king said, bring Haman quickly so that we may do as Esther has asked, right? That seems a simple request. She's prepared a banquet. Let's go. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, what is your wish? And it shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Now, a little bit of strategy in here. Get the king drunk and he makes foolish decisions. Hopefully she can direct those foolish decisions like everybody else directed all those foolish decisions. So she's crafty here. She's robed. She's fully into this mode. This is the job that she is prepared for. So He says, I'll give you anything. And Esther said, well, my wish and my request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and then tomorrow I'll do as the king has said. So she's stretching it out a little bit here. Hey, if it please the king, now that we're having fun and we're interacting, and I've got Haman feeling really good about everything, maybe could you just come back tomorrow to another feast, and then I'll let you know what's really on my heart. And he says, that sounds awesome. And so Haman goes out that day thinking, I'm on top of the world. Not only am I the right-hand man to the king, now the queen has favored me as well. And so now I've got this great role. And so he's really excited. He says he went out joyful and glad of heart. Now this is Esther chapter 5, verse 9. But when Haman saw Mordecai, her cousin, in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him. No shaking, no bowing, no deference. He was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Kind of that, after all I've done, I deserve, man, and this guy is just really ticking me off, right? So, nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. All right, so let's get a little counsel going here. And he starts telling them, the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, and the promotions with which the king has honored him, and how he's advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. And they're like, yes, Haman, we know. You're amazing. Well, this is all that we know. But then he said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared. And tomorrow also, I'm invited by her together with the king. Oh, I've been honored in this way. But he says, nevertheless, you know what? I'm so mad. He says, yet all this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all the friends said to him, hey, string him up. Or in this case, it's more like a pole. Stick him up and hang him on it. Let it be 50 cubits high, which is an exaggeration. It has to be, because that would be taller than any of the buildings in the citadel of Susa. So this is kind of an exaggerated thing, just like stick him up as high as it can go. And in the morning, tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. And then go joyfully to the king with the feast. And this idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows, or the pole, sharpened and elevated. So his plan is to let Mordecai hang in, pierced through and on display for everyone to see how great and how awesome he is. We're going to find out here in the next scene that Esther begins to identify herself as now the Jew, a Jew, and that her people are in trouble, right? We're going to see how that develops here. And her plan to butter up Haman and to make a good connection with the king as she wears her royal robes, she impresses upon him and Haman that she is all for them, and the request is coming. And we'll get to work through that request tomorrow, but she's about to expose herself and identify herself as a Jew to the king. And when that happens, she would now come under the edict that was sent out, that Haman sent out, that everyone who was a Jew was going to die in these next months that are coming. And isn't it true that once we are identified, maybe it was for you when you were baptized, when you declared, okay, I trust in Jesus. I am going to swear my allegiance to Jesus as king and to no one else. That the dark powers of the world start to get enraged and start to get trembly because they don't have power over you. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. That the dark powers get their authority taken away from them when we swear allegiance to the king, because remember, he is the king above all kings. And so principalities, powers, local governance says, man, these people don't respond the way we would like to have them respond. We need to up the pressure on them in order to get them to follow suit and to do what we want them to do. But you know the story of Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they said, "Yeah, we'll serve the local authorities, but we will not go against what our God has said. We serve Him and Him alone." As it comes to these sorts of matters. And when we identify ourselves with Jesus, with the King, we find ourselves pitted against dark rulers and authorities, including the spiritual realm. And you begin to be targeted as a spiritual battlefield. And maybe you've experienced this in your own personal life when you've come out as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, that people look differently at you. I know that's happened to me, partly, because I'm a pastor. I get that. When I first moved into the neighborhood where Heather and I live in Maple Hills, one of the first interactions we had as we were sharing, oh yeah, where's your family from? Where are you moving from? Great, what do you do? And my wife explains, yeah, I'm a nurse and whatever. And like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we da 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 da. And then they said, and she said, oh, and Aaron's a pastor. He's the new pastor at Issaquah Christian Church. And everything just went silent. And everybody's looking around like, wow, the trees sure are lovely today, right? I get that a lot because I'm not trusted in this society as always having their best interests at mind. Why is that? Why wouldn't Christians be seen as glorifying God and serving their neighbors and loving? Well, it's because we have work to do and because there's a spiritual battle that's going on. In 1 Peter, I'd like you to turn there. In 1 Peter chapter 4, 12 through 19. I want you to, you can turn in your own Bible, but I want to read a version. It's a paraphrase. And it's a paraphrase from a cultural perspective where shame and honor are such a huge thing. And we're getting to be that point, I think, with our social media culture, with the cancel culture and all that, where honor and shame are some of the higher ideals in our society. And I want to read this to you because Peter was writing to certain Christians of the first century who had lost social and political standing. Think about that. Christians in the first century who had lost their social and political standing in their culture that was all about all of the other gods. And so I want to read this to you. Oh, precious saints, the difficult trials you face in your community should not surprise you. Such testing is not unusual for God's people. Celebrate that you share in the rejections of God's royal Son. And then your heart will also be glad when His glories are revealed to you. When neighbors despise and revile you because of your association with Jesus, you're indeed honored. God's Spirit of glory rests upon you. Now, of course, none of you should suffer for real crimes like murdering, stealing, or causing trouble. When you hear their derogatory slurs like, oh, you're just a little Christian, a Christ copycat, remember that those accusations are no reason for disgrace. Embrace the slur and praise God that you represent His name, the most prestigious and revered name in the world. The reckoning of God's children has already begun with these trials, and it will be worse for those who oppose God, especially in light of the difficulty of our own salvation. In sum, your present shame and alienation is part of God's plan. Amidst persecution, keep being good citizens and place all your hope in the loyal and powerful Creator. Can you feel that good news? Can you feel that? Like, that's not actually shame. That should be honor. Now, don't get dishonored and disgraced for doing evil things and for being a troublemaker or for stealing or murder. But if you are following in the way of Jesus and you get called out, wow, thank you, Jesus, that they see that I am like you. Isn't that amazing? And there's so much more. First Peter might be a great passage to look at because there's times in there where we say we honor the emperor. to pray for the leaders who God has placed around us. We're in a political situation where it's really tough to know. Right now where I sit, we don't know where the election is going to go. And maybe by the time you hear this, you won't know either. But we're in that mode where, keep on being good citizens and place your hope in the loyal and powerful Creator. Oh, if we could live that way. Now, I want to take us back to Esther for a moment. It says in our versions, translations, that Esther put on her royal robes. Literally, the Hebrew says she wore a kingdom. She wore a kingdom. Somehow, and the symbolic nature of the dress, the magnificent, eye-catching finery that she wore had deep symbolic meaning. She walked in like she owned the place because she wore a kingdom. She used everything at her disposal to make this plan work, right? She wore a kingdom. So if you're asking yourself, how do I dress for the job I want? Which job do I actually want? Whatever shall I wear? Well, right now it's harder than ever to identify as a Christian in America. It's difficult, but it's time to wear the kingdom. Church, it's time to wear the kingdom. Christ is a royal term. So to say that you're a Christian means that you are a follower of the royal Messiah, the one who would come and rule and the one who is now elevated and exalted. And so we live in this strange transition. So wearing the kingdom is what I want to encourage you to do right now. And there's three things that I think you just need to come to grips with. To wear the kingdom, to dress for the job you want to have, first and foremost, like Jesus, is to wear the towel. Remember when it says in John where he knew that everything had been put under his authority, and so he picks up a towel, wraps it around his waist, remember? And he washes the feet of those. Put on the towel, wear the towel. Colossians 3:12 says, put on then as God's chosen ones. So there's a lot to take off in that passage, but Colossians 3:12 says, put on as God's chosen ones, his holy and beloved ones, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Wear the towel. And one of my favorite leaders and podcasters is Carey Nieuwhof. He wrote a piece this week and said, an exhausted culture needs an alternative to itself, not an echo of itself. It doesn't just need the battle back. Authentic, grace-filled, hope-bearing, truthful people are what our friends and neighbors need. A generation tired of hate, yet caught in its grip, will only be released from it if there's a clear alternative. I'm excited and glad that up to this point there hasn't been crazy rioting and clashing and civil war kind of activity. I think America is tired of hate. They're tired of being played and saying, you need to hate that other person and you need to hate that other person. Hate your neighbor, hate your neighbor, hate your neighbor, distrust them, distrust them, distrust them. I think they're tired of it, but they're caught. Like Carey says, they will only be released from it if there's a clear alternative. So wear the towel. Also, wear the cross. Jesus said it, Matthew 16:24, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now that may be wear a cross, but we know how token that can seem. No, wear the cross, meaning daily just say, you know what, this is denial of myself. This is take up the cross. This is following the true King. Following the true King. Much more could be said, but I think you understand that self-denial is the beginning of true life, because we are baptized with him and raised. In fact, that's the next thing. So wear the towel, wear the cross, but wear the robes. Get dressed up. Wear the robes. Galatians 3:26 through 27 says, for in the King Jesus, you are all sons of God. through allegiance to him. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. You've put on Christ. You've been baptized. Okay, the death, burial, resurrection. Some of you need to be baptized. Let us know. We'll baptize you right away. We want to help you die to yourself. That's denial of self, death, burial, resurrection with Jesus. And then you can wear the robes of the Son of God. Again, Carrie Newhoff says this. Imagine if in the next few months at Issaquah Christian Church, love surged. Hope got refueled. You could disagree, but not be disagreeable. You focused on what united people, not what divided people. Imagine if the church just was known for that. In a divided culture, we at Issaquah Christian Church should be the help and the hope, not the hate, right? Because this is amazing. This is what our destiny is. You know, we're wearing the robes, the righteousness of Christ. But guess what? 1 Corinthians 15:53 says this perishable body that you experience that's like, oh, I don't think I like this, must put on the imperishable. And this mortal body must put on immortality. That's our destiny. We're supposed to be wearing the proper clothes for where it matters most, in the kingdom of God. You got to think about this. You need to dress for the job you want to have. So I got to ask you, do you want to rule and reign here and now in the kingdoms of the world? Is that the job you want to have? To rule and reign here and now in the kingdoms of the world? To reign victorious and ride over ride your chariots over the people and no. Do you want your inheritance early like the prodigal son who said, yeah, I'll just take it now. I just want it on this side. And he said, no, you don't want me. And so he gave, the father gave the son his inheritance early. Do you want that? Or can you, with me, dress for the job you want to have? To wear the kingdom. To rule and reign in the kingdom that really matters, right? With wearing the towel, wearing the cross, and wearing the robes. Because listen, the next thing on the list, the next big event that really matters to this kingdom is the return of Jesus. That's next. Jesus is coming soon, and we look to him. And even then, we don't know until then what we will be like, what the job we are actually going to have, what that is actually going to be like, but it will be revealed at that point. 1 John 3:2 says, beloved, listen to this, beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. We will be not just wearing, but we will be like him because we shall see him as he is. So would you say with me, you can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. Say that with me. You can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. I want to seek the kingdom first. And I want to wear the kingdom everywhere I go.